I'm Ellie from Klum House, and I'm going to show you how to make this leather and brass keychain. First, let's go over the anatomy of the keyring, because that's the part about the project that can be a little bit challenging. So we have the fish hook here, and it actually doesn't swivel around into the front. It is only facing one direction. So you have to decide when you're threading your leather on to just make sure that the fish hook is facing the right direction. And then the other thing I've noticed when I've made these a few times is sometimes I'll forget to put the key ring in. So we're just gonna go slow, and we're actually gonna set this up and click the rivet into place and check that everything is set up correctly before we actually set our rivet, and that's what's gonna give us that success rate on this, okay? So let's look again at what it looks like when it hangs on the bag here. So if this is going to be hanging on a bag or a belt loop or something, you could see that the hook is facing this direction. So if we want any message that we stamp to face out, we're going to have to make sure that that message is here when the fish hook is faced the opposite direction. So I just want to call your attention to that. So I'm gonna grab my leather and my fish hook and all my pieces here, and we're just gonna mock this up. Oh, let me show you one more thing, is you actually have a choice here if you want, how you want this leather to lay on itself when you set this rivet. So you can see on this one that I stamped my name into, the tan one, the longer piece of leather comes up and it's on top of the shorter piece of leather. But on this black one, the shorter piece of leather comes and it's on top of the longer one. So it doesn't matter, it will function the same. It's more of an aesthetic choice here. So we have our fish hook, and we have our piece of leather, and there's two holes in the leather here that are a little closer together than these ones. So this is gonna be the side where the fish hook goes. So I'm actually just mocking this up for you so you can see how it goes together before I go and stamp my message. So I'm gonna thread the fish hook onto this, and I have the wrong side of the leather face up, and I have the fish hook faced back down, okay? So this is the closed end of the fish hook here. And then I'm gonna go ahead and grab my key ring and thread the leather through the key ring there, and then fold this up here. And this is that part where I was telling you, you can have this piece on top or this piece on top. And again, we're just mocking this up. We're actually not setting the rivet yet because we haven't stamped our message into our key ring yet. But I just wanna show you that you could totally set this up and even click your rivet into place and take it apart again and actually see what the keyring looks like, okay? So this is what it would look like here if this rivet was set and it was finished. So let's just go over how much space we have to stamp our message. Okay, so this is just a seam gauge here, and I set it to 2 inches so that you can see that you have about 2 inches to work with here for the message, but you're more than welcome to set a message into the back of the keyring too, so you have another 2 inches there. All right, so let's take this rivet off, and then as we're doing that, let's pay attention to the orientation of this piece of leather, because it's one piece of leather and it actually wraps up and around. So if you want your message to be directional, then you're gonna wanna make sure that you don't stamp a message upside down on one side or the other. So I'm gonna go ahead and copy what I did on this key ring here. And I'm actually just gonna stamp my initials down here, and I'm gonna stamp them vertically. So on this one here, I wrote my whole name and I did it to the side, which I think looks really cute. But in order to do something just slightly different, I'm gonna go an EHL right here. And you can also see that as I mocked up the rivet on this one, I put the smaller piece of leather on top. So again, it doesn't matter there either. So I got my really small stamps right here, and these are the 1/8 inch stamps, and here's the E. So now I'm gonna take my rivet apart, because remember, I didn't actually set it. All I did is mock it up. And I know that this is the front of my keyring, and I wanna do EHL there. So kind of keeping my eye on this and knowing that this is the direction that it's gonna face right here, I'm gonna stamp my E into that. And I'm gonna do that on a hard surface. So I grab my hard surface, and there's my E there. And I also need my mallet. So I'm gonna make sure my E is not upside down as I go in to stamp it. Now, this is about where I want it to land, but let me stop right there and say that if this is your first time stamping, you might actually want to practice with the piece of leather that comes in your stamp kit. All right, so you're gonna see a lot of times if you look this up, people will say to wet the leather before you stamp it. Now this leather's pretty thin, so if you're gonna go that route of wetting it, just make sure that you wet it very, very lightly there. So we really don't want our leather to get too wet, okay? Because then the stamp will really just indent into the leather too much and it might even cut the leather. So I'm just gonna practice with my E here, and I'm gonna hit it kind of like lightly actually. And then you could see there that even though I barely hit it, it actually made a really strong emboss of the E. So you really just want to pay attention that you're not hitting too hard and cutting into the leather. Well, I guess that would be a deboss there. So I'm gonna show you what it looks like if I hit it just a little bit harder. So you can start to see that that just got really dark in there and it ran the risk of almost cutting through my leather, right? So you can use this little piece to practice to really get that right amount of force for your message here. And above all, one of the great things about making something like this for yourself or for a loved one is that it's got that handmade touch. So I like to have fun with that and know that my letters aren't going to be perfect. They might end up being a little bit crooked, but whoever I gift this to, or even if I use it in my everyday life, it's going to be that reminder that I made it and I'm proud of it and it's got that handmade touch. All right, so I'm gonna wet my leather just ever so slightly. And now that I know how much force to use, I'm going to make sure my E is not upside down, place it on my leather and just hit it pretty lightly. And that's a nice little emboss there. Go to my second letter, make sure it's not upside down. Eyeball the placement there. Get that in there, and then again, I know that I have about 2 inches to work with, but since I'm only doing 3 letters, I know that's gonna fit in there. Great, and that looks super cute. All right, so then let's go ahead and set this rivet. So I'm making sure that my key ring, or that my fish hook ring, is faced to the back. And then I'm making sure that my key ring here is actually in my leather. And I'm gonna thread this piece onto here, and then thread this piece on and click. You might not hear a click if your leather is a little bit thick. Click my rivet into place there. All right, so now my rivet is set up to set it, but I also just want to make sure that my keychain is set up correctly. So I have my hook facing to the back there, and I have my key ring in here. I can see my stamped message, so this looks pretty good, so I'm ready to set this. And I'm actually gonna use a hammer this time to set this rivet. So I really like to use a hammer if I'm setting a rivet directly on the rivet surface, because it gets me a nice transfer of force on there. Okay, and now I'm on a hard surface with the hammer, and I'm gonna hit it with a light to medium hits just to coax it down to set. And once I feel it starting to set, I'm gonna hit it a little bit harder a couple more times. All right, so that looks pretty good. I know it's set when I can see the rivet kind of indent into the leather there. Okay, so if you're feeling like you're not getting a really good set on your table, you can take your stone to the ground or to a harder surface. But you really want to make sure you're on a hard surface as you set this rivet to make sure that the rivet sets nice and well and that you make a strong hold on this keychain. And that's it. That's how you make a leather and brass fishhook keychain. And you can personalize it with whatever you want.